My job is to make college easier because students have a lot on their plates, like Harvard.
Good afternoon. Thank you, TEDx, for inviting me, which is a big surprise, especially for my family. Anyway, what I would love to discuss is why do we have so many crises? In fact, if we look at the last couple of years, crisis after crisis, and it's interesting because very often, you know, the pace of change has never been as big as in the past. Let me nonsense. I hear that already for 50 years. Let me quote what has changed, and that's the experience of diversity. There's a German philosopher, so today, very Dutch name, who said, you know, we had a long time that we lived in ethnic cages. And the lids are off, and we're all mixing through internet, travel, and what have you. Look at Amsterdam, a city where diversity is all over the map. And our models, our paradigms in which we picture the world are still culturally biased. That's true for leadership. The American interesting viewpoints don't even work in America. We have models like politics that are very culturally biased. And I would like to discuss with you, is there an alternative? Because once we have culturally diverse teams, we need other ways to approach them. And that needs some kind of a culture shock. And it's not easy. How did I come interested in this field? I have, sorry for that, but I have a French mother and a Dutch father, which doesn't make you Belgian. There are limits of what you can take. By the way, last summer we celebrated their 63rd anniversary, 63 years together, yes. And you see the product. Anyway, the rumor in the family is they're still together happily because they never understood each other. Yeah, so there is hope. Now, it's wonderful to be raised in a multicultural family. And for those who know France a bit, especially for the Dutch, quite different from the Dutch. I remember around summertime, about 3 months, we were dumped into Paris with our grandparents. And when our parents were still there, they were chatting, and we were chatting as well. And it was my grandmother saying, "Taisez-vous," which means shut up. Why? If the grandparents are talking to the parents, the children shut up. Same in Amsterdam, shut up. But it was the grandchildren to the grandparents, right? The French are educated to respect authority, which, for example, comes with age and education. And we in the Netherlands, you know, even a policeman will take off the cap and say, "Who are you?" Yeah. Now, this is quite interesting because there was a time the Americans were in America, the Chinese were in China, and thank God the French were in France. And then these local type of management theories did work amongst the Americans, amongst the French, and amongst the Chinese. But now we get multicultural teams, and what do we need to do? Let me give you an example, and that gave me quite deep insights when I was doing some work as a professional in Tokyo. We were invited by a small little bank called HSBC, and we were trying to discuss with them because Americans were quite dominant in Asia to explain that the Asians had to become more objective, otherwise they might cause a financial crisis. As you know, Americans are consultants in avoiding financial crisis. And as you know, what the Japanese say, if they don't understand it, they say, "Hi, hi, hi, I don't understand." So the Americans explained it again, more objective, but louder. And after the third time, the Japanese found out they didn't have a word for objectivity. So they borrowed a word from the Chinese and called it "kakanteki," which literally means the outsider or guest point of view. And for the cynical Japanese, the American point of view. That's objective. Then you have "kyakanteki," which is a wonderful word that says, gee, its subjectivity is the host point of view. Now, if we want to avoid companies looking like this, and this is what we get if we don't connect viewpoints, and you know those companies, we have plenty of them. Sorry if your organization is not there, Yeah, yeah. I had 3 more logos, but there were the 3 sponsors of this event. I had to take them off. Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyway, there are limits to what we can do. Anyway, they said, gee, this is perhaps the basic idea of what we call a dilemma. The outsider's viewpoint, that can't take it, and the insider's viewpoint or subjectivity, you can't take it. And what we want to do with you in this talk is, can we create, that's what we did with HSBC, a Japanese garden. A Japanese garden is an invitation to connect viewpoints. And if you connect outsiders and insiders viewpoint, you get a better picture of reality. Now, I would like to do this with HSBC advertising campaign. A different point of view is simply the view from a place where you're not. Connecting viewpoints. And I was surprised, after Tokyo, 3 months later, I land on Heathrow and I see the new advertising campaign of HSBC. You remember? Work, play, play, work. Okay? And you remember those advertising? It's too bad that we don't have HSBC advertising campaigns so heavily. But this is what we need to do to create a paradigm that helps us. Now, let's practice this a couple of times. For those who know our work, we very often ask this question, and we have asked it to 100,000 people now. After I did some research, this was in the late 70s, early 80s, with Shell. We compared 10 refineries, and this was one of the questions we asked to 6,000 Shell people. We said, you're riding in a car driven by a close friend of yours. Your friend is going 50 miles an hour where you're allowed to go 30, and he hits a pedestrian. You come to court, and the lawyer of your friend says, don't worry, you're the only witness. 2 questions. First of all, what is the right of your friend to expect you to testify to the lower figure, to lie for you as a friend? My friend, A, has a definite right, B, some right, C, no right. Now, before I engage you in a little discussion, who would like to be in this situation? I've never had an individual, and I do this.
Okay, hi. All right, so this is a TED Talk by one of the authors of the textbooks that we have are using in this class, which is Methodology in International Studies. And that's Fons Trompenaars. And Fons is a short form of the name Alphonse. So Alphonse is a common name in Europe. And Trompenaars, I think, sounds like it's a Dutch name. And you heard him say that he has a French mother and a Dutch father. And that's a theme in the book that we are using for the first part of the class to talk about culture, because culture and its impact on the professional lives of people, including of our students, and in a globalizing environment, is a theme in this class, in this course, Methodology in International Studies. It's a theme at this university, in this department. This is the International Studies department. I'm in the International Studies department. I'm one of a handful of political science people. We have economists as well and others. And most of the students who graduate from International Studies department, I was told some time ago, they end up getting a job in their first jobs in the private sector. And the private sector in South Korea is going to have a likely, more so than maybe the United States, for example, in comparison, to have a strong international component. The Korean government has a strategy called Global Korea to develop Korea further in the context of a globalizing environment. This is all before, of course, the 2008 recession began, and then before the pandemic, of course, that began 12 years later in 2020. But the South Korean economy is all about participating in the global economy. I mean, I think something like 70%, and I have to check on this number, let's just put it this way, a great majority of the gross national product of Korea is dependent upon exports. And for the international markets. And of course, to make the emphasis on globalization even stronger. South Korea has little in the way of natural resources. It's not like Russia, which gets most of its gross domestic product from its export of fossil fuels, oil and gas and coal. But rather, South Korea has very little in the way of natural resources. It has some land for agricultural production. But aside from that, the only other natural resources it has is its people. And its people, meaning its labor force and its workers, or the population of South Korea. And just to, again, give you another bit of interesting information to get you, focused on this class and get you excited, hopefully get you excited about this class. The South Korean government has ministries. It has a ministry of, defense and a ministry of foreign affairs, like most countries in the world. But the official name of the Ministry of Education in South Korea, last time I checked a few years ago when I was writing a paper, was that it's the Ministry of Education and Human Resources. The Ministry of Education and Human Resources. That's the official name of the Ministry of Education of South Korea. And that gives you some insight or some indication that South Korea is a country that's strictly focused and intensely focused on being successful in a global environment in which it has to be part of multinational corporations, international global business strategies, and being successful in competing with Chinese companies, Japanese companies, American companies for markets in other parts of the world, with competing with other companies in those markets, and also competing with other international companies who want to exploit emerging markets like in Turkey or Brazil, for example. And that's why this class, Methodology International Studies, I decided when I was asked to teach this class that I would approach the topic of methodology international studies from the point of view of our students in our department have this expectation that they want to get a nice job when they finish. And they're going to get a job in the private sector, in which they're going to be dealing increasingly, if not already, with international affairs, international components. Even in the case, for example, South Catholic University of Korea also has a strong social welfare program, training people to be social welfare workers, social advisors. But even in that case, as Korea opens up to more and more international labor migration, you're seeing again one of the big challenges that those migrants face when they come to South Korea is integrating into the South Korean culture, because the South Korean culture is an ancient culture. It's compared to, say, American culture, a homogenous culture because of its history and its location. But last time I checked, again, this is before the pandemic, about 48 million people that live in South Korea, or at least of a population of 48 million, the word was that about 1 million people living in South Korea were people who were not born in South Korea, including me. And I guess that includes our international guests, our international students in this class. But it also includes not just teachers of English and college professors, it includes people working as farmers, people working in the construction fields, people working in dangerous occupations, right? The 3Ds, difficult, dirty, and dangerous work that South Korean people are increasingly unlikely to do because they have higher expectations and they have other opportunities, but still you need people to work, who are going to work to harvest the crops, who are going to work and do the hard work in construction that's difficult and dirty and dangerous. And so you have hundreds of thousands, again, before the pandemic, up to 1 million people living and working in South Korea, not just people that are working, as I said, in higher socioeconomic status positions, but also working in lower socioeconomic status positions, like as I said, and they workers in construction and in agriculture, and they of course bring their children, or they make children in South Korea. And their children are having difficulty assimilating, might be having more difficulty in assimilating in South Korean culture. So the kind of social marginalization problems that people confront who belonging to minorities that are minority communities in the United States, you're seeing that increasingly in South Korea as well. I mean, there was reports about how, for example, a number of our international students, right, have heard about how much South Koreans really emphasize educational success as a route to social advancement, to higher socioeconomic status, SES, right? And there was a report in the American newspapers that I read about 10 years ago, not long after I arrived here in South Korea, about how South Korean farmers were having difficulty finding women to marry, South Korean women in the village to marry, because the women, like the young men, they were all going off to the city to go to college, go to school, go to college, and then staying there and not wanting to work as farmers. So the people that were remaining as farmers in the countryside in Korea, the men were having difficulty finding wives, so to start a family. And so the South Korean government was beginning to allow more and more people to come from Southeast Asia, from Malaysia, from Vietnam, from Philippines, to come and live in South Korea and marry these Korean men farmers. And then they were having children. And of course, the children, because they're raised predominantly by the mother, their Korean language skills might not be very good, because the mother might not speak very good Korean language because she's Vietnamese or from Malaysia. And so those children would then grow, and then they would have to enter the Korean school system, and they were having great difficulty in performing in the Korean school system, because the Korean school system wasn't prepared to deal with those kinds of children that didn't have strong Korean language skills. Now, this has been a problem that we've had in the United States for many years, because not only because of people migrating from other countries to America to work in agriculture and construction, but also marginalization and discrimination against African Americans, so that their educational levels, they're not as well prepared, generally speaking, as white children in America. So the point is that we have this intercultural conflict issues are becoming more and more of an issue at all levels of Korean society, not only in the world of international business and globalization and international travel, not just in that. It's because it's becoming an issue because Koreans, like Europeans, like Americans, they need migration to do the jobs that Koreans typically do not want to do, but that are what we call in the pandemic essential work, essential jobs, right? Like, for example, I already mentioned agriculture. Also, another area where we have lots of people working who are coming from migrant backgrounds in the United States are in medical care field, including taking care of old people who can't take care of themselves because people are living longer and longer lives. So they're going into care facilities when they get older, and it's typically, it's difficult work. You have to deal with old people who are hard to move, and they can't control their bodily functions, and you have to clean up after them. And and many Americans typically they're hesitant to do that kind of work. So, and this is becoming an issue in Korea. Korea needs to import more labor. Now, of course, there's the issue of maybe people talk about South Korea's labor human resources issue would go away if South Korea were to integrate and reunify with North Korea, because North Korea has a younger population. It needs if the reunification of the North and South Korea were to happen, you need to employ those North Koreans in the economy in North Korea that's really badly dysfunctional. But who knows if and when reunification will happen? The South Korean media talks about it every once in a while, but who knows if and when that will happen? In the meantime, South Korea will have to import more people to do the kinds of work that need to be done in South Korea, or need to be done in the United States, or need to be done in Europe, that traditional majority populations in America, European Americans, or Germans in Germany, or Belgians in Belgium, that belong to traditional ethnic groups, they don't typically want to do that kind of work. And of course, the people that are coming from Africa and the Middle East, and Latin America to America, United States, they're fleeing poverty. They're fleeing difficult, very difficult, horribly difficult economic conditions, and they're also fleeing persecution and violence. So they will come to America and they will take those jobs. But again, there's the necessity of dealing with these cultural conflicts that manifest themselves in miscommunication and imputation of bad motives with somebody who doesn't act in the way I assume they should act. If they're an American, they should act like me, right? That's the standard typical American assumption or German assumption or French assumption or Korean assumption. But somebody coming from another culture, they have different expectations about how human beings should respect each other, how individuals should interact with each other in terms of undertaking work, undertaking tasks, assignments, labor, how they should allocate their time in doing those tasks, about how they should interact with people and show them due deference and due respect on the basis of what? Right? Their age. In Korea, those of you who spent some time here in Korea will find out very soon that age is very, very important in Korea. Koreans are very, very importantly age focused in terms of ascribing status to people just on the basis of the fact that they're older than them. Even if they're 1 or 2 or 3 years older, that the fact that somebody's older than me means that they get some kind of special interactive respect from me just because they're older than me. Americans, they're more hostile to that. They don't like that, even though they also practice it, but they don't like to admit it. Oh, yeah, this is all the topics that are in our course textbook. And he is one of the authors of our course textbook that we are using. And it's a course textbook, which, let me open it up here. So let me go to the lesson plan. And I think I already opened that up. I want to screen share here. So share screen, go here and click on, this is the lesson plan. And so let me find the link there. Just a second here. I got to find the, did I not open up? I thought I did. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. So here is the book we're using, and let me make sure you can see that. So again, it's saying the screen's not showing, so I have to go up here and redo this. So here we go. This is one of our books, Riding the Waves of Culture, 4th edition, Understanding Diversity in Global Business. And that's Fons Trompenaars, who was speaking at TED Talk, and Charles Hampton Turner is one of his co-authors. And you can see this book is in its 4th edition, which means it's considered to be, it's a book that a lot of people want to use and read because it keeps being reissued. And the 4th edition just came out 2 years ago in 2020. So it does reference the pandemic. You know, all of these textbooks, all these books are trying to be updated to incorporate or reference the COVID-19, Corona-19 worldwide pandemic. There's not really much discussion of the pandemic in the book. There's just a reference or two in it, in fact, because the book did come out in 2020, which means it's coming out right at the beginning of the pandemic. But you know, I used this book in previous years as well, and the previous editions of the book. This was the previous edition of the book from 2012, right? So there have been some significant changes from this book to the next edition, this edition. And one of the aspects that I noted about how the books are different is that this book it has more of a strong focus on software applications and software applications that you can buy, to download, to work with the textbook. And that's not in the previous edition of this book, right? And they do it a lot in this book. And, you know, there's a nice website that kind of goes with the book, you know, that they reference a lot. So I think I can call that right up right now. If I go here, I think you can still see that. It's www. Let me make sure you can still see that. Share screen. Go here. Cancel. Share screen. Share screen. Okay, share, and you go here, and so it's www.ridingthewavesofculture.com. So you see that referenced in the book a lot. So let me wait for this website to open. So there you can see, okay, yes, okay. So, you can log in. I think I set up my account. I don't think I bought anything. I think and I think, oh, well, anyway, I'm not going to worry about it right now. I think I thought I already signed up for the book, but you have to pay some money, right? And so there's some external support pages. And so there's a number of references in the book to the to applications. And so free app, open the free app to test your cultural resilience to COVID-19. So let's click on that and wait for that to open up here. And so there's a lot of this in the book. But the point I'm trying to make is this person, let me see if I go back to the book, the author of this book, he's a sociologist, right? He's got a PhD, but he is very much interconnected with the international business community. He wants to talk to business people. He wants to talk to people that are being trained in business and that people that are going to get further training in business. And he is a consultant. In other words, he makes a lot of money working with mid-level executives at many different corporations in many different countries to train them or provide them with useful training in how to manage a work group or a work team or a unit or a company that has employees, human resources, employees from different cultures and national cultures. So the focus in the book is on national cultural differences. Cultural differences between Germans and French and East Asians and Europeans and how to manage your international, interculturally diverse team effectively to get the most benefit, the most positive results from the human resources that are available to you, which are going to be increasingly diverse in terms of their cultural background. And culture is really, really personal, right? I mean, I don't know if any of you were in that American politics class. I was talking about the founding of the United States in the previous class before this class at 9 o'clock. And we were talking about American political culture. And I emphasized in that presentation about how what Americans learn and assume from the time they are born is typically, not always, but is typically assumed to be naturally correct and right. And that is culture, and it differs between cultures. So there are certain expectations, ethical expectations about what is right and wrong, what is moral and immoral, what is appropriate and inappropriate, that are culturally determined, that are creations of human societies, and people learn these from the time they were born, even before they were born, actually, when they're still being gestated, that they learn these, and they just assume that that is the right way, the natural way of dealing with the world. So when they encounter somebody from another culture, like a Korean dealing with an American, or a Chinese dealing with an African, there's going to be fundamentally different assumptions not thought about, that are unconscious, that are just internalized as so normal and natural that people are not going to understand someone, for example, who doesn't value time. I mean, the Germans and the Americans, they really think that being on time, you have to be on time, that's it, not only important, it's moral. And if you're late and you're consistently late and you don't take time as seriously and deadlines as seriously as I do as an American, that there's something wrong with you. You're a bad person. You're lazy. The Americans will stereotype those people who are different in ways that make them appear to be inferior and corrupt. That they're corrupt and they need to be controlled and they need to be civilized. And if you come into a business interaction, whether it be working for a company or not to mention a business negotiation with another company from another society, another national culture, with that mindset, you're probably going to make mistakes. You're going to insult your interlocutors. You're going to insult the people with whom you're negotiating. And if you insult them, they're not going to want to do business with you. They have lots of other people. They're likely to have lots of other companies and candidates to do business with. Okay? So culture is a very personal issue because it ties up with notions of unspoken in my mind and in your mind, in all of our minds, about what is moral and what is immoral, what is right and what is wrong, what is natural and what is unnatural, what is normal and what is perverse. And these are very judgmental, emotional, dangerous terms. And so this book is one of the basic textbooks that is used in business programs in colleges in the United States. I know at least in the United States, this is one of the basic textbooks that is used to teach students of business about intercultural strategic business management, strategic human resources management. This is one of them, and this is one of the most popular. And Trompenaars works really hard to make sure it stays popular. So the book is meant, the English language is easy to read. It's not complicated social science type terminology. There are references to social scientists and important founders of social science. Like there are references to Max Weber, and there are references to Talcott Parsons, and there are references to other important social psychologists who applied psychology to business management and business organization, like Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin is referenced in the book. He's one of the founders of organizational psychology. He's a German, one of these German, I think German Jews who fled Europe and went to the United States. And there are others referenced, but they're not. It's the language is it's easier to read. It's no more difficult to read than reading, for example, the New York Times paper in English, the New York Times. And he does that on purpose because he knows lots of people reading that book are not native English speakers. And not to mention, of course, also they might be college students who are, just, going to college for the first time. Not to mention mid-level business administrators. So he's, and he wants to be popular. And so, of course, since everybody has a smartphone and everybody has an app, and with COVID, you can't do anything without your smartphone, right? You can't travel, you can't do anything without this. He is going to have he has a strong focus in the book on using their software, their app that they use. Let me tell you what he does say explicitly in the book. I don't know, I'm not certain. I can only speculate as to why he says this, why Trompenaars says this, because he's not the only author, but he's the dominant author, right? Look, if I hover over here, nothing comes up for Charles Hampton Turner, like, who's this guy? But this guy, he's got his own picture on Amazon. Ooh, he explicitly states in the book that the computer software applications are not supposed to be used for education. He explicitly states that. We'll find it in the notes that I've taken. Why he does that, I don't know. I can only speculate that. I have to think about that. But he explicitly states that the software is not to be used to teach you. It's supposed to be used for people working in companies who need consultation advice about how to evaluate their multinational corporate performance, their company's performance in an international globalization environment. And that's the focus of the software application. So, I'll think about whether or not, because if I want to use the apps, they want me to pay. Remember, this is about business. So, we're here to make money, profit, right? Let's not forget that. And that's one of our main motivations. So, he wants you to buy the app, and the apps are not that expensive. It's just that I don't know if I really want to get into it, because I don't know, for example, if I can use it for you, teaching in the class. Like, are you going to have to set up your own, you're going to have to buy the software too? And he even says, you're not supposed to use this for education. You're not supposed to use this in college courses. But, software apps, that's what everybody's using these days. So, they're going to talk a lot about their software. And this is just one of the books, the fundamental textbooks that is available. And I'm sure it's been, another reason why I'm using the book is because, yes, it's been translated into Korean language. So you can find the Korean language translations of this book if you need a translation. If you're, a French speaker or a Spanish speaker or a German speaker, they've probably been translated into French and Spanish and German as well. It's because the book is very popular, and his company, by the way, of course, he has a consultation company, was bought by KPMG, which is one of the leading corporate consultancy organizations in the world. They bought his company, and I'm sure for a lot of money. So Trompenaars, he's very much part of this business community, international business community. And you get that sense in the book. But I like the book. I've gotten a lot of great ideas from this book. A lot of ideas I continue to work with and use for my own research. And so I'll talk more about that later. But let me show you some of the other books. This Frans Trompenaars, I think, he mentioned he comes from a French and Dutch mixed intercultural background. In Dutch culture, in the Netherlands primarily, right, is very different, is significantly different from French culture. And he makes that point in the textbook. I'll show you the notes, right, where he says that no region of the world is as culturally diverse as Europe. Europe is the most culturally diverse region of our planet in the whole world, is Europe. So when I say French culture is different from Dutch culture, it's a significant point. And he highlights that because he has had to navigate and deal with those intercultural differences between his Dutch father and his French mother, and it causes conflicts. And I know, because I come from a background like that as well. My father was an Italian immigrant who came to the United States around 1960 and stayed around 1960. I was born in 1962. My mother is not Italian. He met my mother in America. She is Catholic, but she comes from a German, English, old working class, white working class American background, and not from an Italian background, no Italian influence, more Northern European, English and German. And I could always sense when I was growing up that tension. My father, he was Italian. Of course, culture is not the only factor that shapes our behavior. Education makes a difference. Education has a big impact on our behavior, right? That's why you take this class. That's why you take college courses. That's why I take college courses, because we believe that education makes a difference in controlling ourselves, in learning about ourselves and shaping ourselves so that we are not only the prisoners of our socialization from the time we are born, that we can make ourselves, and education plays a critical role in that. So yeah, I know education is important, but education also involves analyzing and trying to understand what I experienced when I was a child. Why this tension? I mean, I always grew up afraid of my father because I was raised by my mother, right? My mother did not work. She was a housewife. She stayed at home. So and she had come from a big family. So she had lots of sisters and brothers, and they were old working class German English Americans. But my father, he was Italian working class. He was very emotional, very loud, very, very, very personal. He would make comments about me that my mother would never make. And it was due in part to different culture. Like my father's incredibly explosively emotional. I mean, we never get violent, but he was scared when I was a child being, socialized by my mother, because at least the stereotype of Northern European English and Germans is you control your emotions. You control your emotions. A truly civilized person controls their emotions. In England, I think Netherlands, Germany, right? In Scandinavia, but not in Greece, not in Italy, not in Spain. If you want to be you want to be truly human, you express your emotions. You fully exhibit the emotional turmoil within your heart to your interlocutor. Right? It's like, wow. I mean, I always mention, I mean, when I was growing up as a child, I always was kind of afraid of my father. And I think my father was always also always afraid of us, his children, particularly me, because I was the firstborn. I was a boy. I was the firstborn. You Koreans, have some sense of what it means to be the firstborn in the family and the first male, the first boy, and I reacted against him. I was more intellectual. I really emphasized learning and books. He didn't, care too much about learning and books. He did, but not so much. And so there was always that tension in the family. And so the point is that these are really important topics, intercultural differences and navigating them, particularly when we talk about people's jobs. Your job, my job, is so important, not for everybody, but as a general principle statement. A person's career, a person's employment, a person's job is so critically important for their self-esteem and self-identity. Who am I in this world? 80% of that answer, in my case, comes from my job. And, it's particularly the case here in Korea and in Asia where, the men particularly, it's changing, but the men are expected to work and work all the time, right? And so the workplace and the work environment is a critically important issue in people's identities. And if you work in an intercultural environment, where I'm an American working in Korea, and I have a Korean boss who can fire me, or who acts in a way that I think is not appropriate, or I'm a boss over somebody else, and I unintentionally insult them because I make certain assumptions about what motivates them that are wrong. I mean, this book contains lots of anecdotes, lots of vignettes, lots of stories about how, and he says that they're true stories. He changes the names of the companies, right? So they're not the original names, but like, for example, one vignette or anecdote that he traces throughout the book is a guy named, I think his name Bob Johnson, and Bob wants to implement in a multinational corporate environment, an internet with multinational, multicultural workforce, a pay-for-performance system. In America, we like that notion that if I work hard and I'm more successful, I should get more money. Just for me. Pay for performance. It's a very individualistic notion. This idea that, if I sell more to more customers, that I should get the credit, I should get more money. Because I'm making more money for the company, I'm more successful as a salesman. And he tries to implement that pay per performance system over a group of employees that are Italians. And Italians say, no. I gotta control myself because this is all recorded, right? So I'll post the recording of this Zoom meeting on the website. So I got to make sure I don't get overly involved here, but in terms of my language. But they tell him they strongly, let's put it that way, they strongly reject pay per performance because the Italians, they were insulted by that. This notion you're going to make people compete against each other, that you're going to make people be hesitant and hostile towards each other because I don't want to give you any insight about how to be more effective because I want to be the one who gets all the credit because I get more money that way. The Italians are more collectivist oriented. They have more of an understanding, and both sides are true, that, for example, anybody's success is built upon group effort. At some level, team group support is necessary for anybody to be successful. And the Italians emphasize that much more. Italian culture is much more group oriented. And so Bob insulted all these Italians and they walked out. When he didn't intend to insult them. He just assumed that everybody's like an American. And everybody's not like Americans, right? But that's a theme in the book, that because the United States was so powerful and dominant in the world after World War II, after the Second World War, that the dominant theories and ideas in intercultural business management, the dominant theories, I would just say, the dominant theories of business management are shaped by the American and a little more broadly, the Anglo-American, the British and American experience, by British and American culture, by British and American assumptions about British and Americans' assumptions about what motivates people, how people have orientations towards human relationships, towards the environment, and towards time that differ across cultures. But because America was so powerful and dominant, and America dominated universities and academic thinking, these American views about what's the most effective way to manage and direct your organization, they don't necessarily always work when you apply them without modifying them in, say, China. And now you're seeing with the rise of China, and that's a theme in the book, and it comes up in a lot of his work, that the rise of China and the rise of Asia more broadly, particularly East Asia, with Korea and Japan, along with China, is showing that the American models of business administration based upon American culture, they're not necessarily the most effective in generating organizational effectiveness, including market share and profit, because the focus of the book is upon business. But these principles that are developed in American business administration science and American management science, they're also applied to nonprofit organizations, and they're applied to business agencies. They're applied to government agencies and nonprofit organizations in the nonprofit sector as well. And you might say, well, yeah, there are different ways of doing business in other parts of the world, but America's so dominant that you really don't have to pay much attention to them because, if you want to be successful, you got to act and, if you have to behave like the Americans. But that's increasingly not the case anymore. The Chinese are showing us there's another way to organize not just their society, but their business administration organizations, their management, that is very, very effective. And I did a search, and that's mentioned in the book, but it's emphasized more strongly. For example, when let me see, I found another. Where's that book? There's another book that. Oh yeah, here it is. I think this is. This is another book by Trompenars and Charles Hampton Turner, and another. Make sure you can see that. So stop share and new share. And so you can see this book I found, and it came out last year. Has China devised a superior path to wealth creation? The role of secular values. And so you can see it's all focused on China. And he's writing not only for a Chinese audience, but primarily for not only for an American and Western audience, but he's writing for a Western audience. And he says it's not possible to isolate China. We have to work with China, so and you can see it's expensive. It's not cheap. So $100 for this book. I don't know why it's so expensive, other than the fact that he's thinking that this is going to be read by business people. Business people have an account for their company, and their company will pay for the book. So that's why you can charge $100 for this book, which is a lot of money, compared to this book, which only costs, $17. Oh no, sorry, $40. This is a used price or rented price. But this is one of the basic books, and it's popular, and it's not only used in the business administration university programs and education programs, but I've seen it also referenced in academic work, academic scholarship. So let me show you, for example, what are some of the other books that are highlighted? Let me see. And so here's another book. This is another standard textbook that if you are more interested in intercultural business management, business administration, you're going to encounter this book. This might be the founding book. Cultures and Organizations, Software of the Mind. It's been translated into Korean language in earlier edition. All these books have been translated into Korean language, and we have them at the library. And I tell you that because if they've been translated to Korean, it shows they're basically important books. And he just died, Geert Hofstede. He also, like Trompenaars, has a Dutch background, and Geert Jan Hofstede, I think, is his son, and he died like a couple of years ago. And it turns out that Frans Trompenaars was his student, which I didn't know until I think late last year, that Frans Trompenaars studied with him. And they both have Dutch cultural background. I already mentioned how he mentioned that TED Talk, how Dutch people tend to are not respectful of authority. They will challenge people who have signs or official positions of authority. And I've seen that, and it's not very pleasant. I've encountered dealing with young Dutch people, and they get drunk, and they're not the easiest people to deal with. But he emphasizes in that book about how in his TED Talk about how Dutch people are irreverent, right? They will challenge somebody who's in authority. They're not overly impressed by somebody who's in authority. And I mentioned that Frans Trompenaars was Geert Hofstede's student. And I didn't know that, but then when Trompenaars' book, Riding the Waves of Culture, first came out, this professor who just died recently, did a review of Trompenaars' book, Riding the Waves of Culture, when the first edition came out. So if I go look for get this out of the way here, and go look for that, yeah, this is, I think, the book. This is Trompenaars' model of natural cultural differences. So, in terms of, showing your emotions, like Italians do, and keeping them under control, like in Northern Europe, being focused upon your relationship with your boss, just as the workplace issue, whereas here, in Germans, a person's boss at the workplace is their boss in life, basically. A cheap status in a society being awarded through what you do versus where you come from in terms of description, like, oh, somebody coming from a big name university, whereas Americans are more oriented in what have you done lately to gain my respect in terms of status, orientations towards time, sequential, people that like to plan point by point how to do things, versus cultures like Italian culture that are more focused upon time as circles of many things going on at once. And if you're a business administration management, you try to do more things that at once. Here you try to do things one at a time. Here you tend to do many things at once. Even if these people might criticize you as not being focused and serious enough. Individualism versus, being individually oriented versus being focused upon the welfare of the group, communitarianism. This is all discussed in the book, right? And this is Trompenaar's model in terms of controlling nature versus controlling oneself and being in harmony with nature. This is Trompenaar's system highlighted here in this Wikipedia entry. So you look down at the bottom here, and you can see Hofstede. This is Geert Hofstede. Remember the guy that wrote that Cultures and Organizations, Geert Hofstede. He reviewed Trompenaar's book. He reviews Trompenaar's book, and let me see if I can go back to that book. So I go back to, where was I here? See, I get lost with all these. Go back here, click here. 1 second, go back here. Yeah, click here. Okay, yeah. So there you can, I think you can see that. So Geert Hofstede reviews his student's book. And he makes fun of the title of his student's book, Trompenaar's book, Riding the Waves of Commerce, a test of Trompenaar's model of natural cultural differences. And he says, this book is not scientific. It's all about making money. He's trying to sell his book to business people. Riding the waves of commerce. I mean, Trompenaars was his student. I mean, just goes to show you how the Dutch are very blunt and they're very honest in dealing with each other. And they don't take it personally. When you read in the book, in the Trompenaar's book, when you read in here, when he talks about Geert Hofstede's work, the work of Geert Hofstede that I was mentioning, and he's very respectful, and he applauds Geert Hofstede. He doesn't fight with Geert Hofstede. He doesn't say Geert Hofstede is wrong. It's like, wow, I mean, I don't think even Americans would do that. They're not so. They're more careful when they criticize their students. I thought that was really funny. I didn't know that Trompenaars was Geert Hofstede's student until, again, I think a few months ago. Wow. So, but that's another one of the fundamental books. And this is the third book that is typically used in college campuses about teaching about how to do intercultural business administration and business management when cultures collide. So these are the three most famous books that are used in American universities, at least in American universities, how to teach students about managing intercultural differences in an organization, particularly a business organization. But this is really long. I mean, this is a huge book. It's something like, what does it say here? Yeah, it's 600 pages, right? And is there another edition that came out? I thought, well, I guess that's the most recent. I think there's anyway, but okay. So that's the introduction to culture. But before I go on here, because I'll forget if we don't do it, we need to do smart attendance. Hooray, smart attendance. So we go to smart attendance here, and again, stop the share and go to screen share. And if you have a question, of course, raise your hand or send me a chat or something. So here's the smart attendance site for the class. And so I guess in terms of the students who are in the class, they're all listed here. I'm not supposed to show people's email addresses, and so I won't show you the list of the students that are in the class. But some of you may have been at Catholic University of Korea last semester and previous semesters where we started using Cyber Campus. Some of you may be new to it, and I'm not really certain how much introduction you got to Cyber Campus before we started using it, and before we used it this semester. So, but just to show you, we typically start the class with attendance, right? So I go here and you can see that the screen, click on attendance, and oh, it disconnected. Okay, well, I got to log back in because it's been a while. Log in here and then close that, go to methodology and national studies, click here and go to attendance. Week 1, add smart attendance. And so we'll start the attendance, and your number is 939. So 939 is the number you are supposed to enter into the attendance in order to indicate that you're here. So what I typically do then is I then go to the chat function and I type in 939, and everyone in meeting. And so everyone, go, there you go. So that's the number you need to enter, and you have like 10 minutes to do that. Right. And, Catholic University of Korea, like I think pretty much all Korean universities, unlike most American universities, is pretty strict about attendance. So I think if you can't miss more than or less than 12 hours in total. So like we'll have 45 hours of class meeting this semester, 3 hours a week for 15 weeks, which means 45. So you can't miss more than 12 or less than 12 or something. And so I have to submit the attendance record at the end of the semester to the university. And I will submit the attendance record that's kept in Cyber Campus on Smart Attendance. And I'll hand that into the university, and that will be the attendance list at the end of the semester. And so what does that mean? That means this week, we're just meeting online, right? We're just meeting online this week, but starting next week, next Monday, I'm supposed to meet with half the students per week in the classroom, and the other students will be attending as well, but online. So we're always going to be using Zoom, Cyber Campus. We'll always use that every time. Whether some of you will be coming to the classroom, this is the rules the university wants us to follow. Some of you will be coming to our classroom, and the classroom for this class, let me open up the syllabus for this class, and I go to syllabus, and the classroom, let me make sure that you can see that. So go here, we go here. And so is K107. So that's what I was told the classroom will be. And you can see we'll meet also on Friday, this Friday at 11 o'clock for 50 minutes. But starting next week, some of us will be meeting in K107. And I'm supposed to meet with half of you in the class for 1 week, and then half the students the next week in the class. Not all of you, because we have to keep social distance because of the Omicron variant, right? So that means everybody's going to be on Zoom, because some of us will be in the classroom and some of us won't be, but we'll all be attending through Cyber Campus and Smart Attendance and Zoom. So bring your laptop computers with you when it's your turn to meet face-to-face with me in K107. Always bring your laptop with you as well as your smartphone, because we're going to always use Smart Attendance. We're always going to use Cyber Campus. We're always going to use Zoom. And we'll even form breakout groups when we meet. And some of you will be in the group together in class, and some of you will be outside. So one person might be outside the classroom in their home, in the residence hall, or apartment, and 2 of you will be in the classroom, and you'll be working over Zoom, an in-class exercise in a breakout room together. And that sounds unusual, but that's the way the world is. We're not going back. And I think we're not going back completely to the way the world was 3 years ago. We're always going to emphasize online virtual software. We're going to have more, as you already heard this, we're going to have more and more people working from home. We're going to have more and more virtual meetings. We're going to have more and more use of software and platforms and different kinds of software, including Zoom, but there's so many others. Like, I've already, done work with people on WebEx, and Facebook has got a program, and so does Google, and so does Microsoft have their own platform, online conference platform called Teams. That's, even when this pandemic is over, which will be very soon, we're not going back to the old ways. So you have to have your laptop. Just like you can't do anything without your smartphone, right? You can't, you can't function without this. Although I see you don't need to show your QR code when you enter the building. When I came in the last couple of weeks, I got back to Korea 2 or 3 weeks ago, and of course that you had to show your QR code, right? You had to go like this. So I go here and from here and go here and click on that, and you had to go like this, and you go here, and you see how does that work here, and you go to Corona-19. You used to do this, right? And you had to call up a QR code, and you get one of these, and it's not working. Huh. Well, anyway, you used to call up a QR code, it won't show. Huh. Well, anyway, the point is, always bring your laptops, because we will use smart attendance to take attendance for all the classes, okay? And I'll talk more about the course requirements as we get set up here. You can see Writing the Waves of Culture is one of our books, and we're also going to use another book, because since we're supposed to learn about how to do research, I begin to talk about learn how to do research in social science, and particularly in the world of intercultural organizational management, and organizational management includes Catholic University of Korea, right? Half the students in our classroom are non-Korean students, right? I think I checked your websites. I'm sorry, not your websites, your email addresses, and some of you are from Switzerland, some of you from Belgium, some of you are from France, right? And so the Catholic University of Korea and all Korean universities are trying to become globalized. And so we have these intercultural communication issues. So we're going to learn how to do what's called we're going to begin to get an introduction as to how to do what's called qualitative research. And again, this is something that's really important for me too, because I'm trying to do qualitative research in my work. And this book is maybe the most famous textbook on introducing students to doing qualitative research. And yes, it's been translated in Korean language because it's that well known. And it's published by Sage. And Sage is a California publisher that publishes social science books, particularly books on social science methodology. They publish lots of books on social science methodology. And that includes qualitative research, right? So I don't have my copies of the books here because I sent my books to DocuCopy to have them prepare paper copies of the readings for you. So paper copies of this book and paper copies of chapters 1 through 6 of the Cresswell and Poth Qualitative Inquiry and Research Design, Choosing Among 5 Approaches, those are being prepared at DocuCopy. I sent them on Friday Today is a Tuesday, or today is Wednesday, so they should be ready. And when they are ready, I will send you all an email that you can go to DocuCopy and pick up the class hard photocopy of the reading. So you don't have to buy the books, just buy the copies. And and it's you can buy the book if you want to, but you don't have to. And I will also send you the link to download a PDF file copy of these books. I have PDF file copies of the book given to me by DocuCopy. I had to, give them a little extra money for that. And they're big files, so I can't send you the files, but I will send you, I have the files uploaded on Google Drive. I can show you this, right? I should be able to show you this. So let's use all this software to show you how exciting this all is, right? So I go to here, you see you have 10 minutes to, now it's down to 5 minutes to, it's almost up. Yeah. Oh, it's all done. Okay. So you go here to, let me go to www Cyber Campus, right? So, or let's go here to Google, share screen, Google. Okay, go here and share screen, just a second, and here, share. And so you can see here, you can see my screen, then you go to Drive, right? And so up on Drive, I have, for example, PDF files of these books. So you click here, and I don't know, if I click on it, it's going to download it. So it's too big. I can't show it to you. But you can see I have the PDF files of some of these books already available. And I will send you the link to download these files. So you will have the PDF file copy of the book. Okay? I mean, this I think is a little bit old. This is the previous edition of Riding the Waves of Culture. So I don't want to send you that because these are the old copies, right? But is this what's? This is from the Cresswell book. This is from the Cresswell and Poth book about how to do qualitative research. So I will send you the link to download this file. And like the language in the Trompenaars book, the language is really easy to read. Book is meant to be used by students. It's not meant for people who are me. It's meant for people that are first beginning to do research in the social sciences in terms of doing interviews and doing what's called qualitative analysis, which you interview people to understand their perceptions, their culture, their perceptions, their worldviews, their values, their norms that you gather through observation, including interviewing them. Like, for example, in focus groups or just interviews. So and this is published by Sage. So Sage Publishers, that's a well-known publisher. Qualitative research is real research. It's legitimate research. So, this is another Sage published book on how to do interviews, right? See, published by Sage. Because sometimes that's controversial. When I was a young person, a young student, there was this big push to make political science research more like economics. So it's got to be quantitative. You have to have, quantitative numeric data. You have to do survey results. You have to use mathematics. You have to do statistical analysis using all the different statistical techniques. And there's so many different statistical techniques for so many different ways of counting data, from Spearman's Rho to Pearson's R to Cronbach's alpha to, these are all names of statistical techniques. And that's what we want to do. We want to do more and more of that. And that was 40 years ago. And now that's still very important, but there's been a big focus, particularly beginning, again, about 40 years ago, on trying to understand culture. And what is culture? How do you define what culture is? When we We compare cultures. How do we compare culture? How do we manage cultural differences? That's a theme in the Trompenaars book. He explicitly states, this book is not about understanding cultures. This book, the Trompenaars book, Riding the Waves of Culture, that book is about understanding cultural differences and managing organization with cultural differences. That's what this book is about. It's not about understanding culture. It's about understanding differences in culture and how to manage people coming from different cultures that means avoiding conflicts, keeping people inspired and motivated, not insulting them, of course, unintentionally. Typically, we unintentionally offend each other. How do you make sure you don't offend somebody? And remember, this is really personal because so much of our identity is tied up with our job. And if I come to believe that my boss is prejudiced against me because my boss thinks Italians are bad, or my boss thinks Americans are dumb, or my boss thinks people like me are inferior, I am going to be in a terrible situation. And I'm going to be unmotivated, and I might leave if I can find another job. And then if you're the boss, you have to go through all of the problems trying to hire new people and making sure you hire the right people and making sure that they fit inside the organization. And oh my God, I mean, that is the most difficult job a manager has, is hiring people. Because once you hire them, you are making a commitment. And if you hire the wrong people, I've been in organizations that hired the wrong people, and it's not only bad for the administration, it's bad for me, it's bad for all their coworkers because they're miserable, and they make me miserable because they're miserable. And that means you're not getting the best out of your people. Your organization is not competing effectively with its competitors in the marketplace as effectively as it could. So this is really important issue because so much of our identity is tied up with our career, and our careers are increasingly globalizing, which means we have to deal with people that are not like us, including people that have power over me, who are coming from a different cultural background than me or from you. You know, and you're very lucky if you get a job in an organization that is managed well. Most organizations are not managed well. They're mediocre. And I've worked with great bosses, and I remember those people. I'll remember those people until the day I die. The great interculturally sensitive, effective, inspiring managers that helped me grow as a person. I will remember those people, and those include good college professors, right? I will remember those people for the rest of my life. And I've also worked for bad managers and in bad organizations, dysfunctional organizations, because they're not working well, in part because the boss of the organization is insecure. The boss of the organization, the manager of the organization doesn't know how to act effectively in that particular cultural environment. And it is also something I will never forget. I still think about these things today. And so, yeah, so those are our textbooks. And I've done a lot of talking. Typically, I won't do this much talking, partly because I think people, you know, they expect me to talk about what are the textbooks, what's the syllabus, you know, what are the expectations. So you saw, let me give you a taste of what this book is like. You heard Trompenaars when he was talking there, and I think I might have closed this file, right, where he was talking about an example of an intercultural difference in responding to a crisis. And that case that he was talking about before I stopped the YouTube video, that's in the book. Maybe if I can open it up here and go back to history and go show where I stopped that. It's probably not worth it, to talk about it too much. But where Trompenaars is talking about it's not worth trying to find right now. But Trompenaars is talking, the book is filled with those kinds of examples of intercultural conflicts and dilemmas. And so one that's in the first chapter of the book, because let me open the syllabus again. And so go to screen share. And so chapter 1 and chapter 2, I've gone through the book and I've taken extensive notes. So let me show you the notes that I've taken for each chapter. And of course, I took notes using the previous edition. I had to update the notes because of the new edition. And so there's some differences in page numbers and there's some more up-to-date research, but so sometimes I might have missed a page number or something from the old edition. And that's because, I had to update the notes that I took from the original third edition and update with the fourth edition. So just be aware. So let me go open up the notes here. So make sure you can see that because you can't be certain it's there. So here is the notes. So this book is about culture. So this is my rephrasing of what Trompenaars and Hampton Turner say. This book is about cultural differences and how they affect the process of doing business and managing. And this is a quote, right? You see quotation marks. This is what they say. It is not about how to understand the people of different nationalities. There are a lot of different ways to try to study culture. Trompenaars claims the way they present the study of culture is for comparing cultures, not for particularly understanding a particular culture. It's for comparing and dealing with differences in cultures as a manager. Understanding other cultures is not possible according to the belief of Trompenaars and Hampton Turner. You can't fully understand another person's culture. You could just have to be aware they're different, and you have to be sensitive, and you have to make sure that you don't appear to be biased against somebody because they have a different culture than you. Because if that person that you're managing thinks you don't like them because they're Korean or Belgian or French, you're done as a manager. You're not going to be effective in managing that person effectively to get the most out of them, to make the most contribution to the organization. They will lose and I will lose as the manager. He mentions he became interested in this topic because he's a child of a Dutch father and a French mother. What works well in one culture means that little change exists and that it will work well in another culture, in another. That's not so clear. Basically, you can't assume that what works well in one culture will work in another culture, right? So he mentions that no management technique that his father used to manage his French family, his wife's family, worked very well. And this is the point they want to make, right? That since World War II, Trompenaars is, from France and Netherlands, Hampton Turner's an English guy. They confront the question of whether or not the American management techniques and philosophies, which they have been brainwashed in many years, the best business education that money could buy, would apply in the Netherlands or the UK, where they came from, or indeed in the rest of the world. And they say American techniques, they dominate the world, but they're not necessarily the best. But they have been dominant because America's been so dominant since World War II, and that's changing with the rise of Asia. So this book attempts to do three things. It tries to dispel the notion that there is one best way of managing and organizing. It tries to give readers a better understanding of their own culture and cultural differences in general, and by learning how to recognize and cope with these differences in a business context, and also to provide some cultural insights into the global versus local dilemma facing international organizations. So, and so he says number 2 is the most important because it's really easy to make big mistakes where you insult other people unintentionally. but they don't know it's unintentional. If they think you insulted them and you didn't mean to, they might give you a break. But if they don't know you, or they just assume that, you know, you're the boss, you're supposed to know what you're doing, and you make some kind of big cultural mistake, they may jump to the conclusion that you are just a bad man, a bad woman, a bad manager. And then you got problems as a manager. So the basis expectations is understanding how our own culture and our own assumptions and expectations regarding how people should think or act, being explicit about our assumptions, because our assumptions are a product of our environment. And so he goes through and talks about all of these different Anglo-Saxon, English and American philosophies of management, of bringing about organizational change, to modify and adapt the organization to a changing, globalizing business environment. There's strategic business unit, and there's total quality management, TQM, and just-in-time delivery. This has gotten challenged a lot, of course, lately because of the global supply chain crisis with the COVID-19 pandemic. The world's economic production system was based increasingly on just-in-time supplies, right? That I do not have to have lots of spare parts available close by to my factory, stored in a warehouse, because that costs money to store something in a warehouse. Instead, I design my production manufacturing capacity of my company in a way that items are delivered to be used, to be assembled just in time when I need them. And that worked well until the COVID-19 pandemic shut down companies, factories, ports, and we're still dealing with it, this problem, right? And so you've really seen how this just-in-time philosophy of being successful as an organization, creating a production chain for your company across the globe, in which everything is developed in one country, where they specialize and ship to another country just in time when the product is needed to be inserted in the next stage of the building of the product you're selling. And you know, I guess in terms of responding, this is one of the reasons why the Chinese think that, you know, this is useful, but this isn't basically something you just should assume the world should be organized around. You want to have all of your suppliers locally based if you can. And that's been a focus in East Asia, maybe not so much in South Korea, but like in Japan and China. You have to be loyal to your local suppliers. Even if your local suppliers for your components that you use to make something bigger, they might not be the most efficient, but they are reliable. And you have to be loyal to them, even though it might cost you some money in the short term because they're not the cheapest price. And then we have the global COVID-19 pandemic, and those companies that have access to local suppliers, they have an advantage. Customer first teams, management by objectives, these are all slogans in the business administration literature over the last 30, 40 years, right? A business process re-engineering and so on. Pay per performance, I mentioned pay per performance. He says in Africa that doesn't work in many cases. Now it depends what part of Africa, right? South Africa is more affected by British and Northern European management culture over the centuries than some other parts of Africa, right? But, and like, for example, pay performance might be more influential or more effective here in South Korea, because that's a point that emerges not so much in the Trompenaars book, but the Hofstede book, the Geert Hofstede book that I mentioned. He goes out of his way to make the claim that there's something unique about Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore, and Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore, because they have been so heavily influenced by British and American culture that they're outliers. They have both Asian, Confucian, communalist values, but they also have a strong individualist component. So it might work in Singapore and it might work in South Korea, but this won't work in other places, like not so much in Italy and not so much in much of Africa, because people will be insulted because people do not like that individualist focus. They think it's rude. They think it's unethical. It's immoral to think only about yourself. And, you know, getting all the money you can just for yourself without thinking about the people around you that are your supporters and your support system. And again, when you start talking about morals and ethics, you're talking about emotions, like what is right and wrong. What does a good American do? What does a good Belgian do? How does a good French person behave? And you don't behave like that. So either I'm wrong, I'm bad, or you're bad. I'm stupid or you're stupid. That's the wrong way to think. And you have to make sure your people don't think that way if you are a manager, according to Trompenaars. He says, in Southern Europe, like Italy and Greece, management by objective schemes have generally failed with the subsidiaries of multinationals. He says, for example, in Italy and Spain, there's more the focus on the organization, not as a military organization that's focused upon achieving the objective through changing the organization where possible, and everybody's got to do their part and they're paid for doing their. No, in Italy and in Southern Europe, like Greece, the organization, the corporation is more like a family. The boss is not just the boss. The boss is like the aboji, the papa, the don, the father, the patron. You have a emotional relationship to the boss. The boss is supposed to take care of the family. So this notion that no, you know, organizations, there's no such thing as emotional loyalty, and that's not important. No, that doesn't work in Southern Europe, but that's the American way of acting, right? Management by objectives, right? That's called the guided missile model of corporations. Trompenaars and Hampton Turner will give you 4 models of corporations. Let me show you, for example, to give us an exercise here. Different corporate cultures. So this is jumping ahead in the book. And let me make sure I'm sharing this with you. Share screen. And we go here. And we go here. So different culture. So this is what they present later in the book. You see it's page 217, so late in the book. There's the incubator culture. That's the startup culture where people are creative. They're doing the work because they love it. There's no hierarchy. There's no boss and underlings and like in a military organization. No. It's a startup, right? The creative founding of Microsoft or Apple 40, 50 years ago, you know, the new biotech companies, right? Versus the guided missile. That's management by objectives fits with guided missile stereotype or archetype or ideal of this kind of corporate culture, where the organization is modified and changed. It's an integral unit that is adapted to meet the objective of making as much money as possible or conquering market share, right? Versus the family, the Eiffel Tower approach. That's more like the military approach, right? The organization is valued in itself, and you have, you know, generals, underlings, like in a military organization. And titles are important, very different from the incubator culture. And the fourth is the family culture. That's like Southern Europe. And typically companies try to move among these 4 different models. And it's very difficult to move among them, to change a company's culture. It's extremely difficult. And that's the point that Trompenaars and Hampton Turner make in the book. Most mergers and acquisitions of companies, they fail. They are not successful because they have such different corporate cultures. How do you make mergers and acquisitions work? 70% of mergers and acquisitions fail. They are, or at least they do not produce the wealth and the profit that was hoped. 70%, almost 3/4. And that's because of these different corporate cultures that when you try to merge these two organizations, the management fails to do that. because people become invested in these different models, in these different outlooks, and and again, people's careers and identities and their job is so important to who they are as a person. So you're going to get them to change their outlook as well as change the outlook of the entire organization. That's a lot easier to talk about than it is to do. And I can give you case after case where that applies. So the family culture is highlighted here. So let me, I've talked a lot here. Let me see here. Let me see. I'm looking for an exercise that got prepared here. So let me ask you a question. Okay. So screen share. Go back to that file I'd opened up. Stop share. Go here. I want to make sure you can see that screen. I just okay. So I have a question for you. I think you can see that, right? Please respond to the following statement. To South Koreans, American culture is the most modern culture. Do you strongly agree, agree, neutral cannot decide, disagree, strongly disagree? So this is the kind of thing we'll do a lot of in the class, these kinds of exercises. So first thing I want to do is we'll come back to this. So stop share and let's go into breakout rooms. So we've got 9 people here. So let's make 3 groups and assign people automatically and create. And so here are your 3 groups. You've got Elizabeth, Yang Chun Shin, and Yi Ju Young in room 1, Aurelian Bianchin in room 2, Micah Belinsky in room 2, and Deo Kwan in room 2, and Gloria Kate and Kritika Q in room 3. So let me open the rooms. So you are in these, so please join those groups. And what I would like you to do, please join these groups. Elizabeth, Elizabeth is still in the doctor's office, she says. Elizabeth might not be able to attend, although if she can, on her smartphone, she can always still participate. And Gloria Kate with room 3. And so you're in these 3 different groups, and I would like you to respond to this. Let me see, let me log out and log back in. Sorry, I want to go back to the cyber campus, and I got to close all of that. And then I go to methodology. And so let me go to survey or vote, I should say. Make a determination from your 3 groups where your group fits on this scale. Where does your group fit on this scale? And let me go to, again, shares in the share screen. So where does your group fit on this scale? Do you strongly agree that American culture is the most modern? Agree, neutral cannot decide, disagree, and strongly disagree. So where does your group fit on that scale? And I also will participate in these exercises as well. When I ever ask you to do them, I will typically also participate in them, but I will flip a coin to choose what I am in terms of what opinion I will write. So it's all random. I could choose any of these because the coin will tell me which am I 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And so heads, I'm 1, 2, or 3. Tails, I'm 4 or 5. And it's heads because Admiral Lee is always ahead. So heads, it's 1. And it's heads. So I strongly agree that American culture is the most modern culture. And so why do I agree? So let me make a statement why I think that's true. So please make a statement explain your group's choice as well. So I'm writing out my, you see, I'm writing out my statement. I strongly agree. American culture is the most modern culture. Because it has, you see, one of the reasons why I like doing these kinds of exercises is because I learn from them myself, because I've been thinking about these topics. And now if I have to write something down for you, I really have to push myself to develop a new idea. And I just got a new idea. American culture is the most modern culture because because the US has the most soft power appeal of any country in the world. It does not have a monopoly on soft power. I mean, it does not have a monopoly on soft power. And it makes terrible it makes terrible mistakes. For example, in Afghanistan. Still, compared to Russia or China, America has more soft power appeal. Being modern, quote unquote modern, is equated with being the global leader of the world community. Leadership does not rely exclusively on soft power, on hard power. A country that relies predominantly, overwhelmingly, on hard power to generate international influence cannot be a global leader. It will fall, as Nazi Germany did. It will collapse. It will collapse, as Hitler's Germany did. And Imperial Japan did. Soft power is critical. It's critical to be considered, and that means that the country, the leading countries economic, political ideology must be seen as the best model. I.e., in other words, it must be the most modern. It is the most modern. Wow. I like that. Okay, so let's hear what you have to say. And who's going to speak first? So let's flip a coin. So group one is heads. Oh, and it's tails. So heads is group two. Okay, group two. So group two. Oh, now what I have to do now is I have to get you out of the groups. You got group two will speak first. You have a minute to finish up. And let's have Oriel Bianchin, the leader of each group, will be the first group person mentioned in the group, speak for the group. Okay, so Ariel Bianchin, Gloria Kate, and Elizabeth, if you want to speak, you can. But maybe we'll have you, since you're at the doctor's office, we'll have Yu Jung Shin speak for Young Jun Shin speak for room one.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, who are you? Young Jun Shin?
Yes, okay. I'm Young Jun Shin.
Yeah, okay, you're in room one.
So I presented our opinion.
Yeah, where does your group?
Is it right?
Yeah, where does your group fit on this scale? I'm going to share the screen. So where does your group fit on this scale? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We are 4 or 5.
Why?
I still agree with it. Because culture is not. It's not a thing that have superior or inferior. So it's modern or not. It should be. It can be changed by many sites. So we don't think it's American culture is the most modern culture in the world. So we disagree with it.
Yeah. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer to these questions, of course. I mean, these are just these terms like, to be modern. Everybody wants to be modern. Don't you want to be modern? I want to be modern. You don't want to be backward. You don't want to be primitive. No, bad. Modern, good. What does modern mean in our globalizing world? What does it mean? There's no single definition of what it means, but it's definitely got this positive image, right? To be the most modern is the most advanced. It's being a leader. Was Nazi Germany the most modern when it conquered all of Europe? Right? Was that the most modern country? No, it was still hard power based. It was based upon military conquest. Now, the Americans have tried to do military conquest, and they failed in Afghanistan and Vietnam. But other places, a lot of places like America, like in Europe, today especially with the problems with Russia, South Korea, 70 years after the Korean War, they generally like America, right? America dominates South Korea, not because of its military, but because after 70 years, the Koreans kind of like America, the Japanese kind of like America, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, that's an interesting idea because I'm trying to make sense of what this notion of being modern means in terms of status, you know, social status versus ascription, what you're born into versus social status through achievement. I respect you for what you've done, or should I respect you for your family or your background, your ancient Chinese civilization, or you go to the moon. You put satellites into Mars and Venus. That's so cool. You make COVID-19 vaccines in less than a year. You're so cool, America. And I'm thinking a lot about these topics over the last 2 years, right? I've been writing about these topics. Okay, so that's group two. So that was group one, sorry. So we go back to the breakout room. And so Ariel, Bianchin, what did your group decide? Where are you?
I'm here. We decided, like, we had a similar view. We said that it was 4 or 5, so we strongly disagree. We tried to define what being modern was, and we didn't like come up with any definition either. It's hard as well to compare the Korean culture and the American culture because of the American, like the United States being a melting pot. It's hard to define the American culture in the first place. And both cultures also evolved in a different way. So yeah, strongly disagree.
Yeah, yeah, trying to define what modern is. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah. I guess there's a lot there to talk about. I mean, in terms of, you know, because we think, well, China's not going to be modern and is not going to be a global leader because it's an authoritarian political system. They don't have democracy. They have a one-party dictatorship. And that might be true. And the Americans claim that the Chinese are committing genocide against the Uyghur minority, Muslim Turkic minority in Xinjiang province, and in Tibet against the Tibetans in Tibet, and so on. But at the same time, there's a lot of countries in the world that face this development crises while we have global climate change, like in Africa and in Asia, that have these legacies of imperial colonialism, and democracy will not look like democracy in much of Africa and Asia is not going to look like American democracy, because they're different kinds of states left over by the Portuguese and the Spanish and the French and the Dutch and the English and empires, drawn with these artificial boundaries in Africa and Asia, into multicultural, multinational, multi-ethnic societies. So yeah, anyway, I don't want to, we have to do some other stuff here. Okay, and then group 3, I think that's group 3, and group 3 was Gloria.
Hello.
Hi.
So yeah, we had a hard time to decide which scale we wanted to put on the subject, because, like as you said, like the modern word used in the description was kind of biased for us, because it's like imprinted with a lot of Western vision of what the lifestyle could be. And in European countries, I don't know if in other countries, like certainly, but I don't know, we learn a lot about les lumières and the low state and what it could bring to a country. But we know that in South Korea they were colonized by Japanese and Chinese, so they were closed at first, but it didn't provide them to like grow inside. And America is like most like they were also colonized, but they are extended like in all the world. And I think that's a different way of growing. So the country of modern is like really different from one another. And music, we saw the K-pop everywhere. Like even in Japan, they call it like an invasion and the new form of colonization. So we can see that this is growing, and like pop culture in America is also growing, but it's much more older. So yeah, we had a hard time like putting a scale, because like I was personally saying strongly disagree, but the modern term was like really, I don't know, it seems picky to say it without any nuance. I don't know how to say it.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
well, it wasn't meant to be, like I said, there's not a right or wrong answer. The purpose was basically to get us thinking about these these stereotypes. We have a global stereotype that the American way is the best way, that the American model of management, whether it be, management by objectives or pay for performance and so on, that these all come out of the United States, but there are different models that sometimes those apply and sometimes they don't, and sometimes you have to combine them. And so Trompenaars and Hampton Turner is going to argue for, Trompenaars is really into yin and yang thinking, Confucian thinking, the Korean flag, it's got the yin and yang. He's really into this yin and yang notion. He says it explicitly in the book, and I'm not surprised he wrote that book on China, because that's what the whole book that you're going to read is all about. How to combine and integrate the apparent opposites to come up with something new and better. That the opposites are not really in contradiction. They emphasize differences. And how do you manage an organization with people coming from these different cultural backgrounds to integrate dynamically and working to achieve your objectives, these differences to generate creativity and success? All right, so he's really into Eastern Asian Confucian philosophy in this book, right? So you're going to see when you read that. And then, so we're going to meet on Friday for 1 hour, and we're going to do more of this kind of exercise. I'm not going to speak. I mean, I spoke for so long at the beginning of class because I was like trying to talk about what the books are going to be using and what the smart attendance and blah, 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 blah. But I'm going to do it. I'll continue to talk, but we're going to do more and more of this kind of thing starting on Friday. Like I already got, like, for example, so what I want to show you I will do here is, we go to smart attendance. And you can see now what I want you to do is I want you to vote. Vote on whether or not you think American culture is the most modern culture. Do you strongly agree? So please, if you haven't already voted, please vote. And I'll give you a participation point by voting. Hooray! So typically I give you 1 minute to do that, or less than a minute. So you can see the screen, right? You see the screen, I'm sharing the screen. So please vote on Cyber Campus. And has everybody voted? I think everybody might have already voted. So 7, 9, 10. So what's that? Well, no, I mean, we got to finish. I closed it. You can't do it on your phone, Elizabeth? Okay, I can change. She's getting her vaccination. She's getting her booster. So, I mean, I shouldn't talk about her being, but she's just getting her vaccine. Okay. So like if I edit this, okay, so I'll extend it to 12:15. Okay, Elizabeth? 12:15. Okay. So you can vote until 12:15. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. All right, and so you can see, so that's how we'll do a lot of these kinds of things in class, and that, and then when you vote, you get a participation point for participating, and you can see most people disagree. Has everybody voted? I think everybody's voted. One more time. The neutral cannot decide. Yeah, I mean, I only said America West because I had to flip a coin, right? I could have been disagree, but I did get some ideas out of this. So this gives you a sense of what we're going to be doing through the semester. And of course, even when half of you meet with me next week in K107, we're still going to do this on smart attendance and Zoom breakout rooms. I mean, so, always bring your laptop. Okay. All right, so that's it for today. And I will be sending you emails over the next couple of days with when the DocuCopy hard copies are available and the PDF file downloads and everything else you need, okay? Okay, so I think that's it. And I'll go here and I say, 안녕하세요.